Hey class, this is the first module. This is what you see. So I just recorded the course intro Fall 21 podcast. I highly recommend you listen to that because I talk about the syllabus and I talk about how the course is structured. So it's extremely important that you listen to the course intro Fall 21 podcast. And then the week one module, that's the material that I want you to learn for this week that you're going to be tested on next Tuesday, which I believe is the 31st of August. So what you see here, you see this, as you can, this is a student preview, so I can see what you see. Here's the syllabus. Here's the course intro podcast, which I just recorded this morning. That talk about the structure of the course and that talk about the syllabus and how you're going to be graded and that kind of a thing. So listen to that. I actually will ask you some questions on that on your quiz next week. I'll ask you some questions on basic questions on the syllabus. If you're familiar with it, you'll do fine. And now here's week one module. And I'm going to click on that. And this is all the material that I'm assigning for week one. So I won't assign anything else for week one. It's all here. It's all in this module, okay? And what we're talking about, and when I say we, I guess I really mean you, you are learning about to a certain extent, what Texas was like before the Spanish arrived here in the 1520s, but also, and maybe more importantly, the first encounter between the Spanish who owned Texas from 1492 until 1821. The first encounter between the Spanish and the Indian groups in Texas, in this case, the Karankawa. Now, I want to stop for a second. So I just gave you a date, which is why people hate history, right? I said the Spanish controlled Texas from 1492, as you should remember. 1492 is when Columbus sailed into the New World and claimed large portions of the New World for Spain. In 1821 is when Spain is kicked out of North America and Texas becomes Mexican. So what I'll do is, to the extent that I can, which is pretty good, I'll talk about, when I mention a date, I'll talk about the significance of it. So again, so you can fit it into this bigger story. And I talk in my podcast that the key to the success in this course is to see Texas history as a story. So when I introduce dates or names or things that I think might be kind of confusing for you or frankly boring, I'll try to contextualize the information so it makes more sense. I have to be honest with you, I find it hard to keep names and dates and other things straight myself, which is why I'm sympathetic for you or to you or with you, something with you. And that's why I work so hard to tell this as a story and to de-emphasize the things that students often hate about history, while at the same time recognizing and acknowledging there are just some facts that you have to know. You just have to know them. Sorry, you just have to suck it up and learn some stuff. But I try to make it easy for you to learn because I fit it into a bigger story. Okay. So the first link is the podcast, and I'll open it up so you can see what it looks like that you're going to be listening to this week. So and let me stop it now that I've turned it on. And basically, what you'll find out about is the story of Cabeza de Vaca, who washed ashore in Texas in the late 1520s, spent 7 years in North America. Eventually, he walked across the continent, almost all the way to the Pacific. We think he was in Texas for what's now Texas. Of course, there wasn't a Texas in the 1520s, right? There was no conception of Texas. But we think he was what is in now Texas for about 4 years. Before he reunites with his Spanish comrades on the Pacific coast, near the Pacific in Sinaloa, what's now the Mexican state of Sinaloa. And then he goes back to Spain and he writes an account of his experience in Texas, which is called La Relación. And that's what you're going to be reading this week. You're going to be reading de Vaca's words himself, his description of Texas in the 1520s. So I think it's pretty cool, but maybe I'm a historian, so I would think it's pretty cool. But you're reading the words of someone who was here about 500 years ago. A Spaniard, the Spanish were the most powerful country in Europe at the time. But de Vaca, as you'll find out, his party screws up. They get basically lost. They end up shipwrecked in Texas. Almost all of them die, except for 4 members of this expedition. This is what I'll talk about in the podcast, so I'm not going to go into it detail now. And then de Vaca writes about his experience, his encounter with native groups. In this case, it was the Karankawan Indians. Anyway, I think it's pretty incredible. I think it's a really incredible story. It's incredible that he survived. His descriptions of Indians are incredible. It's just really, really interesting. Here is the de Vaca. Oh, there's a discussion by Frank de la Teja from Texas State about de Vaca to give you some more information on who this Spaniard was that washes ashore in Texas and ends up writing an account, the first European account of Texas. Then this link here is the excerpt of La Relación that I want you to read. I'll open it up real quickly. I'm not having you read the whole thing. What it does is it creates a Word document, which you then open, and you get the portions of La Relación that I want you to read. Okay. Now, the next link is another, it contextualizes de Vaca. So here's the de Vaca excerpt, okay? Then there's something that always confuses students. So let me talk to you about it now so you're not confused. It's called the Primary Analysis Worksheet. And I give you that sheet because if you can answer the questions on the worksheet, you will be able to do well on the quiz next week. You don't have to turn this worksheet in. It's just that what I'm doing in giving you this worksheet is trying to guide you into the information that I want you to take from the de Vaca reading, so you have some sense of what it is I'm looking for, especially on the quiz. So you don't have to turn this worksheet in, but if you can answer the questions on the worksheet, you'll do very well on the quiz. Okay, so what the worksheet is, and maybe I should call it something else, I'm trying to guide you in what I'm looking for in the excerpt of La Relación that I'm having you read. And then now there's some more information on these other links. The amazing story of Cabeza de Vaca, which you might want to read actually before you read the account. It again gives you a context for who de Vaca was and what was so fascinating about him. There's a map of the de Vaca journey, which I highly, highly recommend you open. Because if you open this map, it'll just make a lot more sense to you about what he was up to. So you'll see he starts in Cuba, goes to Florida, ends up in Galveston, and then walks across the continent. So anytime I post a map, I highly advise you to take a look at it, because boy, a map is worth 1,000 words. Just take a look. It's in German. I don't know why, but I guess I couldn't find one that was in English. But you should know your geography enough to know where it is he was traveling. So take a look at that. And then I have 2 links on the Indian groups that existed. There were many more Indian groups that existed than these 2, but that I talk about that I think are important during this period. One is about the Caddoan Indians who lived in Northeast Texas. And the second one is about the Karankawan Indians who lived along the coast. And the Karankawan Indians were the ones that de Vaca encountered. These are the 2 Indian groups that I want you to know about and the basic features of who they were what the nature of their society was and their significance. And let me again just stress, there were multiple Indian groups in Texas. There wasn't one dominant Indian group. And again, there wasn't Texas at this point. Texas is a construct that really dates back probably, I would say, to maybe the 1720s. So there's no idea of Texas at this point. So these are two Indian groups out of the many Indian groups that lived in this area that I want you to know about. So this is the module for week one. This is the information I want you to know for week one. And then I'll post a keyword in a day or so to help also give you a sense of what it is I'm looking for.